They say good news is supposed to make you feel wanted, included, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. But when Ethan called me that Tuesday afternoon, the words he said, "I'm getting married, Mom," slipped into the room like a draft under the door, cold and sharp and unsettling. His voice was polite, a little rushed. He talked about dates, venues, Jessica's ideas for the decor. He never asked how I was doing, never paused to see if I was excited, just kept talking, like reading off a checklist. When I offered to bake something for the rehearsal dinner, banana bread, maybe a couple of pies, he chuckled softly. "Oh, that's sweet, Mom, but Jessica's got the catering handled." "You don't need to worry about any of that." Then the call ended, leaving me staring at the black screen, holding the phone so tight my knuckles ached. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened Facebook, scrolled through photos of their engagement party, smiling faces I barely recognized, a cake with their names written in gold frosting. The caption said, "Celebrating the start of forever." I hadn't been invited. I wasn't even mentioned. I closed the app and stood in the dark kitchen, clutching the phone against my chest. I pulled the old pink dress out of the closet, the one with soft pleats and tiny pearl buttons. I hung it on the back of the bedroom door and whispered to myself, "It'll be different this time. It has to be." The days leading up to the wedding, I spent cleaning the house until my hands hurt. I baked banana bread and set it aside, just in case Ethan might want to take some home. I ironed the cardigan with the pearl buttons, brushed off dust from the old photo albums. I told Marcia about the call. She just patted my hand and said, "You've always done your best, Diane. Maybe that'll finally matter this time." The morning I left, I noticed how quiet the house felt, how the floorboards creaked under my shoes, like they were protesting my leaving. I locked the door, slipped the keys in my purse, and told myself this wedding would be the beginning of something better. I didn't believe it, but I had to try. The resort by Lake Erie looked like something out of a magazine spread, glass walls reflecting the sun, white chairs lined up on a manicured lawn, servers in crisp black uniforms weaving through clusters of people, holding champagne flutes. I'd arrived early, old habit, I suppose. I walked in, holding the gift bag close, hoping maybe Ethan would come find me. A young woman at the check-in table handed me a plain name tag, just Diane Miller. No mention of mother of the groom, no fancy ribbon like the ones I saw on the bride's side. I pinned it on anyway. Inside, music played low and pretty, the kind of instrumental pop that sounded elegant and hollow at the same time. I scanned the room, my eyes searching for Ethan. And there he was, laughing, hugging Jessica's family, arms wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, and just chose not to. A young man in tight dress pants and a headset gestured me toward the back corner table. "This way, ma'am," he said cheerfully. I looked at the closer tables. Signs read, "Bride's family," "Groom's college friends," "Bridal party." My card just said, "Diane." I sat between a woman from Vermont who raised alpacas and a man who sold home insurance. They were nice enough, polite in that way strangers are when they're waiting out the next part of the evening. When the speeches started, Jessica's father told jokes about her childhood. Her college roommate cried over tequila shot memories. Someone leaned over to ask when Ethan's mom would speak. Jessica just smiled into the microphone and said, "Maybe later," before moving on. Laughter, glasses clinking. No one looked at me. Dinner came. Chicken breast with cold asparagus, rolls no one touched. I picked at my plate while Ethan danced with Jessica, then Jessica's mother, then a line of guests I didn't recognize. He never came near my table. Not once. Near the end, the photographer circled the room, snapping candids. Twice he passed me by without lifting his camera. I folded my napkin and laid it carefully across my half-eaten plate. No one noticed when I stood. No one called out when I walked through the lobby alone and stepped into the night air, cool off the lake. I didn't cry until I reached the car, and even then, the tears felt thin and old, like water dripping from a rusty pipe. A week passed before Ethan called. His voice was cheerful, almost too bright. "Hey, Mom, How about dinner at our place? Just us. Jessica's out with friends. Thought it'd be nice to catch up. I wanted to believe him. I baked oatmeal cookies, wrapped them in foil, and put on the same cardigan I wore the day I brought him home from the hospital. On the drive over, I rehearsed what I'd say, how proud I was, how happy I wanted to be. Ethan answered the door with a quick, polite hug. "Come in, kitchen's through the hall," he said. There was no smell of food, no clatter of pots. Just a small table set for two with a bottle of wine already open and a stack of papers clipped neatly beside the plates. "Got you some wine," he said, pouring me a glass before I even sat. His hands moved too carefully, his voice just a little too rehearsed. "What's all this?" I asked, nodding toward the papers. "Oh," he said lightly, "just something to make sure everything's squared away. You know, in case anything happens." I picked up the top sheet, felt the weight of legal language I barely understood. Durable power of attorney, real estate management, immediate effect. "It's pretty standard, Mom," Ethan said. "Makes life easier for everyone. No rush." But the pen was already uncapped by his hand. I looked at the empty plates, the clean kitchen. There was no dinner, no smell of garlic, no warm bread. Just paper, wine, and a quiet push behind his polite tone. My stomach sank, slow and cold. I set the papers down. "I'll take these home," I said softly. "I'll look them over." He didn't argue, just nodded, eyes flicking from my face to the pen and back again. We talked about nothing, weather, neighbors, the new show on cable I hadn't heard of. When I stood to leave, he hugged me again, lighter than before, like his arms were already letting go. In the car, I didn't start the engine right away. The foil-wrapped cookies sat untouched on the passenger seat. I looked back at the house, the porch light snapping off behind me as I pulled away. I got home that night and didn't even bother to change out of my shoes. I just stood in the hallway holding the stack of papers Ethan had given me, staring at the quiet walls like they might answer the questions ringing in my head. I kept thinking about the empty table, the pen laid so carefully across the contract, how his voice stayed calm while he slowly erased the part of me that was supposed to be his mother and turned me into something to manage. At some point, I set the papers on the kitchen counter and walked downstairs to the basement. My knees ached as I stepped onto the cold cement floor. In the far corner, under a shelf of old paint cans, was a small metal box I hadn't opened since the winter Tom died. I knelt in the dark and dragged it out. The lid creaked open, the metal cold against my fingertips. Inside, everything was organized the way Tom always did. Folders labeled neatly, envelopes stacked in chronological order. My name written on one in his shaky handwriting. I opened it and read. It was short. Tom said he knew I'd never ask for help, that he set things aside so I'd never be cornered, never be forced to depend on anyone. He told me not to tell Ethan, not because he didn't love him, but because money changed people. Because sometimes it revealed who they really were. The folder held statements, investment accounts, stock portfolios, an annuity tied to a small property in Kentucky. Altogether, over $7 million. I blinked at the number, closed the folder, then opened it again, sure I'd read it wrong. But it was still there, steady, as Tom's voice used to be when he promised me things would be okay. I sat on the basement floor for a long time, the cold sinking into my bones. The box opened beside me. Upstairs, the house was quiet, but it felt different now, like I wasn't alone anymore. Like Tom was standing behind me, his hands on my shoulders, reminding me I still had choices. When I finally stood, my legs shook, but I wasn't scared. I felt something new instead, something like resolve. The next morning, I found Marcia's number scribbled on the back of an old birthday card in the junk drawer. I dialed with trembling fingers, half expecting her not to pick up, but she answered on the second ring, her voice warm and steady. "Diane," she said, like no time had passed at all. "What's wrong?" I didn't lie. I told her everything, Ethan's dinner, the papers, the cold, quiet way he'd spoken to me. I told her about the folder Tom had left, the money I hadn't known existed, the feeling in my stomach like something rotten had split open. She didn't gasp or tell me it was shocking. She just listened, then said, "Come over. Bring the papers. Bring everything." Her house was exactly as I remembered. Small, filled with books and quilts folded over the backs of chairs. She set out coffee, strong and black, and read every line of Ethan's forms, flipping the pages with brisk, careful fingers. "This is ugly," she said finally. "Immediate authority, sweeping access, no oversight. These aren't forms you give to someone you love. These are documents you hand to someone you want to own." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Marcia looked at me over the rim of her mug. "You take back control. Quietly. You protect what's yours, Diane. And you do it before he knows you're even thinking about it." We spent hours at her kitchen table drafting the new trust. Marcia explained every clause, every line. We wrote in conditions Ethan couldn't bypass, 2 independent physicians required to declare me incapacitated before anyone else touched a cent. We transferred Tom's investments into the trust, layered protections so thick even Ethan with his charming smile wouldn't be able to cut through them. When she finally pushed the papers toward me to sign, my hand shook, but the pen felt solid, like something I'd been waiting to hold all my life. "I am not invisible," I whispered as I signed. "I am not a convenience." Marcia nodded. "No, honey, you never were." I left her house with the new documents tucked in my purse and a quiet heat building in my chest. I wasn't done. Not yet. Ethan thought he could manage me like an old piece of furniture. He was about to learn I wasn't made of wood. I was steel. Ethan called on a Thursday afternoon. His voice was smooth, easy, like he'd practiced every syllable. "Mom, let's do dinner, just us. No papers, I promise. I just want to talk." I agreed, though the word felt heavy on my tongue. I told Marcia. She offered to wait nearby in her car, just in case. Ethan's house looked the same as before. Perfectly trimmed hedges, porch light glowing like a beacon. He opened the door barefoot, wearing jeans and a button-down, like he was still that boy running through my kitchen looking for snacks. The table was set. This time, there was food. Roasted chicken, steamed green beans, a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. For a moment, the sight made something ache in me, some old instinct to believe the best of him. We talked about nothing at first, weather, a neighbor's new fence, a show on streaming he insisted I'd love, but my eyes kept drifting to the stack of papers on the side table. New forms, new pen laid across the top. Halfway through dinner, he brought them over, setting them between us with a soft sigh. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're safe. I talked to a friend in elder law. He said this is smart, simple." I reached into my purse, pulled out the thick envelope Marcia had helped me prepare. I set it on top of his stack. Ethan frowned, confused. "What's this?" "My plans," I said, voice steady. "Everything is set up, Ethan. My finances, my property, my future, they're protected, ironclad. No one will be touching them but me." His mouth twitched, smile cracking at the edges. "Mom, come on, you don't need to." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Don't try to handle me, Ethan. Don't smile at me like I'm someone you can nudge into signing away everything Tom and I built. I am not yours to manage." Silence fell. He stared at me, fingers tapping once against the tablecloth, then stopping. His eyes were hard now, mouth tight, like he'd bitten into something sour. "Is this because of that old lawyer friend of yours?" he said finally. "You're letting other people poison you against your own son." I pushed my chair back. "No, Ethan, this is because I finally remembered who I am." He didn't speak as I stood, didn't follow me to the door. Outside, Marcia watched from across the street, engine running. I got into her car, and as we pulled away, I saw Ethan still sitting at the table, the papers untouched, the smile gone. I didn't look back again. It was 2 weeks before I saw Ethan again. I was sweeping the porch of my new house, the sun bright but the wind still sharp. I noticed his car parked across the street, engine idling. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped out, shoulders hunched, an envelope clutched in his hand. I stayed where I was, broom braced against the railing. He walked up slowly like he was carrying something fragile inside him. His eyes darted to the ground before meeting mine. "Mom," he started, voice rough. I was wrong. I let things get twisted. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. I didn't want you to get hurt. He held out the envelope. "These are the papers. I'm not pushing you anymore. I swear, I wanted you to know I'm sorry." I didn't take it. I sat down on the porch steps, leaving space between us. He sank onto the wood beside me, careful not to touch me. The wind rustled the dried leaves on the sidewalk, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. "I forgive you," I said finally. His shoulders loosened, a breath escaped his chest, but then I added softly, "But forgiveness doesn't come with a key. Some doors stay closed, Ethan. Maybe forever." He looked at me, eyes wide like he hadn't expected the wall I'd built to be so high. "Mom, please." "No," I interrupted, gentle but firm. "I will always love you, but you don't get to manage me. You don't get to make decisions for me. That part of us is done." His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists on his knees. "I just wanted to help." I smiled, small and sad. "You wanted control. That's not the same thing." A silence fell between us, thicker than the wind. Finally, he stood, placing the envelope on the step. "I hope one day you'll see I was just trying to protect you," he muttered. I didn't answer. I let the silence hold. He walked back to his car, glanced over his shoulder once, then drove away. I watched the street until the tail lights disappeared around the corner. Then I picked up the envelope, walked inside, and slid it into the trash without opening it. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, feeling something in my chest loosen, something old and heavy that had been there far too long. The first snow came early that year, thin and soft, blanketing the street outside my new house. I stood by the window, mug of coffee in my hands, watching the flakes swirl and settle like a quiet verdict. There was no radio playing, no phone buzzing with messages I didn't want to answer, just the hum of the heater and the tick of the kitchen clock. In the afternoons, I walked to the library. Sometimes I worked the front desk, stamping books and recommending mysteries to old men with shaking hands. Other times, I tended the small garden out back with Margot and June, planting bulbs that would bloom in the spring, turning the soil so it wouldn't harden into something lifeless. I didn't think much about Ethan, though his absence settled into the corners of the house like dust. I didn't wish him harm, but I didn't invite him back either. Some wounds need to breathe in the cold before they heal. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notepad and wrote a letter. Not to Ethan, not to Tom, but to the woman I used to be. The one who thought loving someone meant giving them everything. The one who believed being quiet was the safest way to keep the peace. I told her she was allowed to put the weight down now, that she was allowed to be more than someone else's safety net, that she was allowed to be her own. I folded the note and tucked it into a book I wasn't planning to finish. Then I baked myself a small cake, lit a candle in the middle, and whispered a wish I didn't say out loud. The candle flickered once before going out, leaving the room warm and dim. I didn't feel lonely. I felt earned, like I'd carved out a small space in the world where I could finally rest. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and soft, layering the world in white. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, sipped my coffee, and breathed. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire and fury. Sometimes it's just choosing to live, to grow, to plant something new in soil you turned with your own hands. Sometimes it's finding peace in the silence, knowing you built it yourself. And that, for me, was enough. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with shouts or slammed doors. They're fought in silence, in the quiet spaces where you learn to hold your ground and refuse to be small for someone else's comfort. This story reminds us that love, at its best, is not about control or obligation. It's about respect, choice, and trust earned over time. It's easy, especially as a parent, to let the line between care and sacrifice blur until there's nothing left of you but the pieces you gave away. But there comes a moment when you realize protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't an act of war, it's an act of love for the person you're becoming. We often think revenge is about getting even, about punishing those who hurt us. But maybe real revenge is reclaiming your life, standing tall in your own skin, and finding peace in places they can't touch. It's about building something new out of old wounds, about refusing to let someone else write the ending of your story. Remember, you're allowed to choose yourself, and sometimes that choice is the loudest, most powerful thing you'll ever do. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If it touched something quiet inside you, if you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or simply needed the reminder that you're allowed to choose yourself, I hope you carry that strength forward. Your voice matters. Your story matters. If you found meaning here, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear these words too. And I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what part of this story spoke to you most. Every share, every comment, every click helps this community grow so more voices can be heard and more stories can be told. Thank you for being here. You're not alone.